Okay, let's get to our main topic of conversation. This is, I believe, our 10th history conversation, and it's on Fridley Elementary Schools. I did my own research, and I can think of at least 12 elementary schools that there have been in Fridley, going way back to one of the first schools back in about the 1870s that was here.
That was about the time you were born.
Just about, yes. About time I think I was born in 1880, I'm not
you
sure.
told me 1880, yeah.
Well preserved.
I'll say.
So I know there was that school, and then there was the school that was over across from the Fridley Library that my dad built the foundation of our home on, that burned down before this one. So that's two schools. There was also another one up by Osborne Road. Six, right? And that was a very old school, right? So there's three of the older schools, and then there were 6 District 14 schools, so there was 9 there. There was Woodcrest, which is in District 16, and then there's North Park, which is in District 13.
Riverwood.
Well, yeah, then there's the 6 Fridley elementaries were Parkview, Riverwood, Rice Creek, Gardena, R.L. Stevenson, and Hayes
One
next door. Oh, I know what the other school was. The other Fridley Elementary School was not located in Fridley. Where was it, Warren?
Columbia Heights.
No?
Well, you're talking about not Arsenal, are you?
Yes, the Twin City Arsenal School. That was an elementary school. That was located in Arden Hills. Well, it was actually, I think it was New Brighton at the time, but maybe not.
It was not New Brighton.
It wasn't, oh,
No, but I know some of the people who went to that school.
okay. Well, I went to that school, Warren went to that
I think
school.
we referred to it.
Tom?
Right.
Did you mention that school that was 32? School 32 that was down along Main Street? I see we have a
That's the
picture
first-
over here.
That's the first
No.
one, isn't it?
Is
Was
that
that, I think that's the first one, I think, from the 1870s or whatever. Right.
There were 2 schools, one on 96 and one that was facing toward the west,
Hmm.
further up
There were 2 schools.
on the Arsenal property.
Really?
Yes.
Well, we only had one.
Okay.
There may have been someone else, because we had the main office building there.
Were you on 96 or not?
Right on, no, we weren't on 96, we were on 10.
Okay, one of them was on 96.
So there was another one that was on, but that wasn't a Fridley one,
Okay.
because the only Fridley one was the one that faced on Highway 10.
Now, I'm speaking of Arsenal in New Brighton.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one, this is the property that's being taken over. I thought Arden Hills was taking over the property.
Working
but-
on it.
Right.
And the Fridley principal was principal of both of them.
Fridley principal is principal of both, okay.
Both these talking about 2 schools, Fridley principal was principal of both of them.
So there were 2 separate buildings
I
that
didn't know
were,
it was 2 separate buildings, it was 2 separate schools. I didn't realize there were separate buildings.
Yeah.
okay.
That was.
You had to walk up a hill to get to the one that faced to the west.
Oh, okay, so then there would have been 13 schools. Very good, we'll upgrade our archival records. So, we had all these wonderful elementary schools, and how many are left today?
2 or 3.
This one.
Hayes and.
There's Hayes
And Stevenson.
and Stevenson, and that's it.
That is it, yeah.
We're down to 2. And we have a middle school and a high school. And then beyond that, we have couple private schools. We have Totino Grace, and we also have the school that is by the Islamic community.
They also have a Lutheran school, don't they, across the street from Unity?
Yes.
Right, there's, well, but that's in Spring Lake Park.
Okay.
The one
But then there's the one up here at,
69th and University.
yes,
right?
Woodcrest Baptist.
Baptist.
Yeah, so there's that school as well. We are a very educated community.
Oh, yeah,
We're not short on schools.
that's right.
So who would like to begin by sharing some memories of Fridley schools? that you went to or were part of? Tom, you have a lot of history on this.
I didn't intend to talk to, I'm here to hear people that went to school with, so I'd
Oh.
prefer hearing.
Well, I know you did, you wrote a history of Fridley schools at one time, so that's why,
I'd like
well, you're gonna sit back and critique and make sure they tell the real history.
The ones that went to the schools, yeah.
So, who would like to begin? Lowell?
Well, my name is Lowell Norton, and I noticed this, first thing I noticed, looking up front here was it said Fridley had traveled back in time. Well, this really goes back quite a ways. Is there anybody here that went to District 6 school? No? No takers? Okay, well, the District 6 school was completed about in 1922. And prior to that completion, my father had built a big house because he had a slug of kids. And he had a lot of rooms, and he had couple of big rooms. And we had school in our house for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months or something like that. Well, District 6 was being completed. And I remember this because I really wanted to go to school at that time. I was about 5 years old. And no way, I couldn't get it. The school was upstairs and we lived down in the lower part of the house. But at noon during playtime is when I kind of went to school. I always made peanut butter sandwiches and stuff like that by myself. My mother baked bread that was great, you know, and we'd load it up with peanut butter and eat an apple along with it. So I'd do that, boy, I don't countless times during those days. And when the kids went outside to eat, boy, I was right there with them. So I just kind of made believe that I was a member of that school. Well, finally they pulled out and went over to the new school. Of course, I couldn't go at that age yet, but in another year or so, I started school. And I remember about the time I started, we probably had maybe around 30 kids in the school, all in one room, all 8 grades, and the little old-time chairs that we would sit at with the slant in front of us and the ink well up in the corner and all of that good stuff. And when the one teacher teach all 8 grades, and we would be called to the front row is where she had people in the very particular grades from kindergarten right on up. And that must have been quite a chore back in those days to teach. And I have to say that I don't remember learning anything until the 7th and 8th grade. So I don't know. I suppose I did. I remember we used to use the old flashcards when we'd get up there, and we had to do penmanship. You never write like that, but boy, you would be swinging your arms. You know, you could do wonderful penmanship. But I couldn't write worth a hoot. But I just don't remember learning too much until in the later grades. And we did have teachers about every 2 years. We'd get a new teacher, and I don't know why they didn't stay around long. Maybe they were all young, and maybe they just got married or something. And that was kind of interesting to have new teachers now and then. I guess I don't remember too much about. I do remember that when I graduated from school, and in District 6, why I did know a few things before I went to Columbia Heights for a couple of years, and the thing I guess that I remember the most was the fact that. Man, I was pretty smart. I was the second highest in the class. Of course, there were only 2 of us. so it was a little and that's a fact. The other guy Franson is his name. I don't remember anybody remember the name Franson. There's quite a few people in that group of kids too. And we were all part of the Redeemer Lutheran Church here. We all started church when I was about 10, I think. And our whole family went through being confirmed, and the old church is sitting out there in front. And I was a member there until the Army got me, and then I never went back. I got caught somewhere else, different churches. But let's see, what other things do I remember?
Building fire,
The what?
starting a fire.
Oh yeah, we had an old stove in this building that was about 4 foot across on the outside of it, and it was in one corner of the building, and I got the job of taking care of that and getting into school about an hour ahead of everybody else, starting it up, and I was paid, I think it was $5 a month I got for that, because at that time, $5 was a lot of money. and I remember I had that for a couple of years, so we had some good times over there. We had ball teams, we played a lot of diamond ball, and we'd play New Brighton. You bet you would get beat most of the time, I think, but we had a few good people. The name Gutwalt probably is well established over here. The Gutwalt family lived right close by the school, and so they were in it. And our family, there were 9 of us, or 8 of us at that time, and we all went to school there, graduated from there, and then came over here to the Church of the Redeemer too. And I don't know, what else?
What year did you start school?
I think I started school when I was about 6.
And what year was
Yeah,
that?
that would be in 23.
23.
Yeah,
He's 90 years old.
I think so.
What year was the school built, do you know?
Yeah, in 22.
In 22.
Yeah, the reason that they had school in our house was,
Electricity or not?
Did you have electricity?
no, we didn't get any electricity until 1931 or 32. The REA came in. Yeah. Over by the National Pole Treating Company is where we lived. We were there first, and then they came in and kind of ruined the whole thing for a long time. And we were about 1,000 foot off the road. And the other thing, of course, I remember, it was about, 10 or 11 years old, in 1929, when we had the 1929 tornado. And nobody here knows anything about the 29 tornado. Well, it took a hunk out of Northern Pump at that time, lifted up, no one over hit our place, and it hit the pole yard and knocked the telephone poles all over. And it was a very wide, destructive tornado. But I noticed there at 1940 there were only 747 residents living in Fridley. Well, at that time there weren't very many of us. So I suspect that's why there wasn't much history about it or anything. But it was in the newspapers. Some pretty good stuff. And our place looked like a lot of the litter that was that you saw in these scenes here. That was real good. And I guess I better knock off. My wife is pointing at her watch.
My name is Warren Woods. I was a student in this school from the fall of 1943 through the spring of 1947. I guess that would be 4 years. First, second, third, and fourth grade. Teachers in this room above us for first and second grade we had was Miss Cook. And then in third grade, Miss Schmidt as a third grader, and then the following year, Mrs. Desert for my fourth grade teacher. Like I say, there was 2, at the time we were going to school, there were 2 grades in each room. I do recall one thing that as far as attention, quiet, that Miss Cook had us do was, I have to lay the microphone down, was to make the Christmas tree. And I found out I was making the Christmas tree wrong for about 6 weeks, and then finally somebody said, you don't make a Christmas tree like this, you make it like this. So you had to do that on the desk when she wanted quiet and, you know, attention. And maybe it was when she was teaching one grade, the other grade had to be quiet. I don't recall exactly. Good memories of the school, and I can recall the recess periods. So we'd go outside and we'd play on the swings, chase the tadpoles in the spring out here in the culvert during the thaw time. Pump, pump, pull away, which was not encouraged, but we played it anyway. Cowboys and Indians. Most of us were Indians. There was one cowboy, and we always tied him up. I think it was Chester Andrews. It was not Chester Hayes, but I think it was Chester Andrews, as I recall, and he always volunteered to be a cowboy, and he always lost. Good memories here, and of course it was leading then to our travels through other schools out of Fridley, Bremer in 5th grade, the Arsenal, which we spoke about in 6th grade. We can talk about the Arsenal because several of us went there. And I do recall, as a 6th grade teacher, there were 2 6th grade teachers. There was, the one I had was Mrs. James, who was a little, I always refer to her as Ann B. from Andy Mayberry, because that's the closest simile that she was like. And then the other 6th grade teacher was a 6-foot-tall fellow, the name, I think Waymeyer comes to mind. I'm not sure if that's his name, but he was 6'4", ex-Marine, graduate of Bowling Green, and he drilled the boys, us boys, like boot camp. And he formed, I know as 6th graders, we played tackle football, which was not encouraged, but we did it. And he made an all-star team out of us, and we played the 7th, 8th graders, and I think we held our own. We played league baseball, overhand league baseball with absolutely no equipment whatsoever except our gloves. There were always bruises and things, and then we also had boxing and wrestling. And I remember that he went down the line in our gym class and said, wrestler, boxer, wrestler, boxer, wrestler, boxer. He came to me and I thought, oh, I gotta be a wrestler because I'm not a good boxer. And I was a wrestler. And then he had us, and there were about 18 matches, as I recall, and he had wrestlers taking down wrestling holds on people with gloves on their hands who were trying to fight off the wrestler. And he just simply wanted to run an experiment. And I think the wrestlers won 16-2 or something like that. And there were many black eyes, bruises, bloody noses, and I understand that he was only teaching 1 year. We went on to Minneapolis Marshall the next year, so I can't verify that. But it was boot camp when we were 11 and 12 years old. Those are basic, my memories, and they were good, happy memories, except for the ptomaine poisoning we got in 6th grade from the cooked rice and the cream peas.
Thanks, Warren. I'll follow up with him with what he had to say about the Arsenal School, my memories there. Chester was there also at the Arsenal School. And of course our family had the bus company. And they called the buses to the school when everybody got sick to take us all home. The aisleway of the bus was a river.
Oh, yeah.
It was the worst ride I had ever had in my life. Only one student went to the hospital. That was Jerry Snyder. Remember that? Yeah, because blood was coming up and so forth. He got the worst case of it, but the rest of us all got ptomaine poisoning, and it was a miserable time. The teacher you were speaking about, it was very interesting. I remember him very well because I also played on one of those football teams. But he had this habit when he would get a little bit upset with the class or something, he'd say it almost aside, he'd say, oh shit. And a couple students told their parents about it. They had a trial right here in this room. And they had witnesses, students came up as witnesses to testify against him for having said that word in the classroom on more than one occasion, and he was immediately fired. That's how times have changed.
Sadly, yeah.
Yes. So, who else would like to share some memories?
Well, I was at Riverwood, I mean.
Well, come on up here.
Come on up.
Well, I don't, mine's
Okay,
actually
just,
interesting.
yeah.
Agnes Shaw.
Oh, we have to bring the microphone up a little closer to
Little
your
closer,
mouth.
okay.
That's fine.
Well, my name is Agnes Shaw, and we moved here when my husband got out of the Air Force. And my children went to Riverwood School, and it seemed like they always had to call on me to be either Santa Claus, or then one time they had a carnival up there, and they told me that I could sell balloons, and I dressed up as a clown and was the only one dressed up as a clown. But then we lived in Africa, and also my husband was on the board of directors of some of the Indian things. He was part Indian, so we had an Indian collection. So I always did social studies for every year, and would bring some of the artifacts, Indian artifacts, or I'd bring African things there. And so and then I think we had our first PTA meeting up there. I mean, they had a lot of PTA meetings at that time that we had attended. I remember especially one where they showed a film on accidents, what happened when they had accidents. But other than that, that's all I remember about the school. My kids went there, and they had nice teachers. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Agnes.
Yeah. I forgot to tell you that we had this kitchen band. It was called the Kitchen Cuties. Betty Bacon, a lot of the girls were there. One time Betty fell off the thing, and we did a dance to Hello Dolly and then Rindersella. And one lady said one time, well, I think we could have done without them.
My name was Gwen Clark, and now it's Gwen Naraki. And I don't have to tell where I live. No. Okay. As little kids, my sister and I were twins, and when we went to school, Roy Dean Shear was the only kid and he's still the only one I remember in first grade, but now I realize that Warren was in my class, but Roy Dean had to sit. We insisted that he sat between us wherever we sat, otherwise we wouldn't go to school, and there were many times when we stayed home and cried. We were not very mature for children. But Mrs. Cook was our teacher, and as I remember her, now Warren says that he had good experiences. I think Warren was a very good boy. I had my own mind, and I can remember Miss Cook making us put our heads on the desk and then walking down the aisle and slapping every one of us on the head, and your nose would bounce on the chair, on the desk. But then if everything went well, we got to go outside and drink from the pump. Do you remember doing that, Warren? And the other thing, when we started school here, I remember my folks warned us to be careful of those toilets, because they were indoor toilets, but there was no plumbing. It was just a deep hole, and we had to be so careful. And don't drop your clothes down those things. And then Grace and I were sent to second grade in Columbia Heights to Oakwood because they didn't have enough room here. And when we got to Oakwood, we hadn't learned how to print, because in the country school you just wrote by script. So they held us back because we had to learn how to print. But it probably didn't hurt because we were pretty immature anyway. And then we came back and we went to third grade, or we went to second grade. Then we went to third grade with Mrs. DeZerk. And so Warren was in fourth grade and we were in third. And now I realize she was a good teacher. At that time I didn't like her, but she would have projects where she made a city out of sand under glass and put a lot of work into it and did some other things, but she also took smoke breaks and would leave the class alone and leave other kids in charge of the class while she went out and smoked. And then we went into Bremer. And that was a very old building. And you were saying, it was kind of a scary building. And then then that was for 4th grade. And that was only 1 year that they took us down there. Then we went back out to the Arsenal, and they used the Arsenal for 2 years. And then by that time, we went back into Columbia Heights to Oakwood, and we all went to Oakwood then, didn't we? Did you go to Oakwood in 8th grade?
8th grade I went to Oakwood, 7th grade
Yeah.
I went to Marshall.
Okay, the 7th graders went to Marshall, and the 5th and 6th graders probably went to, in 5th grade you went to Marshall, huh?
No, 7th. 7th.
7th grade you went to Marshall.
You were
Okay.
6th. You were 6th then.
Okay, so in 6th grade we went to the Arsenal, and then after that we went to Oakwood, and then to the Columbia Heights. But, you know, when I think about it now, we did learn quite a bit, and it went pretty well. And I also remember the Christensens always picking us up, and your dad always had a smile. We loved it when he was driving the bus.
Thank you.
Hey, that's
And
nice.
and Grace, are you going to come up?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's very good.
and you can start that she brought up. She said, well, Gwen says, when Grace and I were young, we were twins. What are you now?
Okay, I'm Grace Clark. I was Clark, and I'm Norton. And in 1947, we went to 4th grade at Brimmer School, and I learned a very important lesson out on the schoolyard. Never believe everything you read in the paper. They brought us down to this Brimmer School on the bus the first day, and we all got off the bus, but there were some reporters and photographers from the Minneapolis paper there. So they said they wanted half of the children to get back on the bus, and they wanted the other half to sit down alongside the bus, facing the teacher who was facing the side of the bus. And then they said, okay, the kids in the bus, put your heads out and raise your hand. Some of you raise your hand. Some of the kids sitting down, raise your hand. And then they had the teacher holding a book. And the next day there was a picture in the paper, and it said that our room was not ready, so they were holding class on the bus and in the playground. So that was my important lesson that I learned in 4th grade.
Doesn't change, does it? Yeah.
Anybody else? This is
Did we
good.
solve the problem of Andy over?
Oh, yeah, one of the questions, yes, was, we were talking on the phone today, was the games we played as kids. One of them, some people called Annie over, some said Andy over, and the third one was Auntie.
You don't want to say auntie, you'd say auntie.
Auntie over.
Andy
Yeah.
Highover.
Andy, I owe.
Andy I over. So there's lots of variations of that. Lots of variations. So are we live? Okay.
Kick the can.
Pardon? Kick the can?
Kick the can.
Yeah, I think we did play some of that. Did we have a teeter-totter here at this school? I think we did.
Maybe one.
I think we had one teeter-totter and one set of swings with 2 swings.
2 swings.
And that was it. And then
Jungle gym. Marigold.
we didn't have a jungle gym.
Oh, we did.
Not,
You had a jungle gym. That must have came after me, because I was a couple years ahead of you. Yes.
And then the fox and goose, big circle with spokes?
No, did you play fox and goose? No.
Not here.
I remember we did as kids, one of the things every year, and we did this first through at least 3rd grade, they had one day where everybody brought a toy from home. And everybody showed their toys to the other kids, and we played for an hour with toys. Whatever the meaning of that was, I don't know. But yes, Tom.
There was a national dictum against pump on pull away. We weren't allowed to play in North Dakota either. But we did.
What was the problem with pump, pump, pull away?
Safety.
Safety?
Yeah.
Oh,
Some of it we
okay.
We played it all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, we played it quite a bit. And hide and seek was another one that was pretty popular. But this, pardon?
Washington Poke, where you drew a circle on someone's back.
No, that one, we didn't play. The Washington Poke.
Oh, we did
We
in
draw a
Columbia
circle.
Heights.
You did in Columbia Heights.
Prisoner's base, prisoner's base.
Prisoner's base? No?
Well, for softball, to get around the ball, I think around 3rd or 4th grade, we were playing, somebody would bring a bat, and we have a softball.
Okay.
So you bounce out, 500, chicken base, things like that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we had a variety of baseball or softball games.
Cross out.
Yeah, it was cross out, bounce out, and what was the other ones? Chicken base
Yeah.
and,
Well, if you played 500, you got so many points for
Well, you got
a fly
five.
ball or one bounce or a ground.
right, that's right, played 500, you got so many points for, you know, catching balls and so forth. But this school, when I went here, the year before was 8th grades. So I was one of the first students that was here when it was only 4 grades. And it was Mrs. Cook, who had 1st and 2nd grade, so I had her for 2 years. And yes, I did get my head pounded into the desk more than once. And we had the first hot lunches here when I got into the 2nd grade. Mrs. Swan prepared all the hot lunches, and if you didn't like the food, you stayed down here. I remember the tomato soup never did agree with me, and I could spend 2 hours down here until every bit of that soup was eaten up. And she wouldn't let you, and if you didn't do well on a test or didn't finish an assignment, you didn't get to go down for lunch. And so you stayed there and continued to work through lunch, and you just didn't get lunch that day. And it was pretty strict. And then Mrs. Gallagher was my teacher in 3rd grade. And she used to be a teacher earlier, and they brought her back. And this was during the war years. And so she had the 3rd grade and 4th grade. And then when I went into the 4th grade, it was Mrs. Schmidt. And that was, you'd have been in the 3rd grade then. So you remember the day that she broke down? It was during the war, and the kids were talking about these terrible Nazis and how horrible the Germans were. Well, she was German and had family in Germany. And she's sitting at the desk, and she just broke down in tears and just stopped the class. And the kids didn't know. I mean, we didn't know what we were saying at the time. But to her, it was very, very hurtful for her to go through that experience. And I went on to, it's so interesting, they divided us up amongst all these different schools. I went 5th grade to Oakwood, and then 6th grade to Columbia. Now, Columbia School was right next to the high school, which has since been torn down. Very old school, and in Columbia Heights. And I remember in the basement, they had a gymnasium, and the floor was like a wave because of all the frost heaving and so forth. There was never a level floor down there. And then 7th grade was when I went to the Arsenal and had Miss Saunders, who broke my heart 4 months into the year by getting married. And she was the prettiest teacher I'd ever had.
You darn right she was.
So, you remember her, Chester?
You darn right.
You darn right, he says. She was a beautiful teacher. Yes. And then 8th grade went to Minneapolis Marshall. And that's when we were called the Fridley Fairies. That was the term they gave us at Minneapolis Marshall. We were the Fridley Fairies. Yeah, so. Anyway, there's a very rich history of elementary schools in Fridley, and yes.
How many of the Fridley grade school people went on to high school?
All of us went on to high school.
Great.
And I know, I don't know what the year was when high school became required education in Minnesota. But my mother went to Columbia Heights High School, and she was there in 1929. And so she was going to high school in 29, but my dad was born in 1902, and so he would have been like 8 years old when he started. He was born in July, so he'd been 8 years old when he started school. He went 8th grade, so he'd been 16. So in 1918, it was still 8 grades. So it must have been somewhere in the 20s where high school became a required education, because it was only 8 grades back in 1918. Well, we're probably almost out of tape too.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Still got 10 minutes left? Wonderful. Is there any other comments about life in Fridley schools? Tom, did you want to say anything?
No, I just, one comment.
Can you hear?
This is what happened to the school building. Okay, and I kept searching and searching, finally found it. It was sold for a home and it was moved north.
Still there?
Couldn't find it.
I had the same problem.
You couldn't find the school.
Nope, never did find it.
And where was it located here? It was
Just north of Osborne Road.
just north of Osborne Road.
It's still there, and they added on to it.
Mm-hmm.
Invited everybody that went to school there to come
Mhm.
up, but I was gone or something
Mhm.
at that time.
Another school that we did have was, and we had this person speak at a meeting a few years ago, Geneva Duffy had kindergarten in her home back in the early 50s, before we had kindergarten in Fridley. And we didn't have kindergarten in Hayes School, in our first school. It took a while before it got started. But there were a lot of parents that wanted their children to go to kindergarten. So she started kindergarten classes in the basement of her home up off East River Road. And she came and spoke about that at one of our meetings, I believe. Because we did she didn't speak, we did an article on it. That's right, we did an article in the newsletter about that kindergarten school. Gwen?
One thing that we did that I think was nice was on Saturdays, and I think it was Mrs. DeZerk's husband would show movies. And in my mind, there was a stage up there, and we used to put on plays and lots of community things and use that stage for a lot of things. And the parents were very patient with us, and we did some dumb skits, and we'd work at that, and it really kept us busy. But then every Saturday we could come and watch a movie for 10 cents, and they were the old cowboys, and have popcorn. What?
Western cereals.
Western cereals, okay, yeah. But that was a nice,
And those Western cereals where my dad got those movies. And there was a fellow that owed him some money and couldn't pay him. And so he gave them the 16 millimeter projector and to pay off the debt. And I still have some of the movies that he gave them. There was a whole box of movies from the University of Minnesota. Where he got them, I don't know. But they were on fauna and floral, and they were really boring educational movies. I mean, nothing you really wanted. But there were some really good ones. We had an original 1935 Mickey Mouse one. That was just, it would be worth a fortune today. But my brother's grandchildren got into it years ago and just had a ball tearing that whole thing apart. But what I do have is, still have the original. It's a Charlie Chaplin movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got it on a 16 millimeter disc at home. And I'm not messing with it until I can get a professional to, because I don't want it to all just disintegrate as we unravel it, but we'll see what happens. Well, it's almost 8:25. Yes, you have another question?
Did you want to say anything about
Jerry?
chemical toilet?
Oh, yes, those toilets up there, yeah, they were a deep hole, but they had chemical tanks down there to process. And it was, the fragrance was fairly strong when you went back there, yes.
They didn't put lime in it like they do?
No, they had these special chemicals but it was a brand new, quote, technology that was being used. And we were we became the subjects for the experiment. And I don't think we lost very many children, as I recall.
District 6 had the same thing.
District 6 had the same,
Yeah.
right.
About 1945.
40, no, this has been about 1940, somewhere around there. Well, this school was built in 31, so I don't know when those were put in. But I thought they were put in when the school was built in 31.
I think they were.
Yeah, they were put in 1931. And you recall the stage back in that end of the room. I recall it too. That's where they held court that time. And in fact, they did hold court when we did have Fridley Court here, when we got a justice of the peace. Court was held right here in this room.
Now, was Elmer Johnson the judge?
Elmer Johnson was one of the first judges, yes. Yes. Chester?
Bob, you probably remember when we had the 4-H club here, we used to have our basket socials in this very room.
That's right. We started, yes, we had basket socials here. We started the 4-H here. We started 4-H here, and that was in the 1940s. And I remember the best yodeler was Alex Anderson. I mean, he was just a natural yodeler. They were teaching yodeling at one of these, and he was a natural yodeler. Okay, anything else? If not, I want to thank you all for coming. Next month, the second Monday, it will be at Springbrook, but you'll get that in your newsletter. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for
Yep. Bye-bye.